I think it must have been my first museum visit with Gamel when we touring the areas that had the Boston School painters. Um, and when I saw when he walked with us and talked about the nude, this Paxton figure, and it was so astonishingly beautiful. Again, I've said that about seeing the Blue Cup for the first time and those things, but this picture was like exactly where you'd want to go, so to speak, in my estimation at that time, with the Brackman knowledge. It's just like Brackman information refined, really, really highly refined, bringing the color, bringing the drawing into the equation. The nuanced articulation study of the color movements through the arm and that sort of thing blew my mind. Just blew my mind. Well, uh, but let's thank our people. We're going to talk about starts and the look of the start, and that was one that was where Gamble told us that was grabbed by the director of the museum at the time. Paxton was teaching there, maybe the lead teacher or whatever, and the director of the museum was in his studio and he said, "Can we just have this? Can we just stop right there? We're going to buy this from you right now, because we want students to see what probably, he didn't say Boston School start, but it would have meant what a good start looks like. And that is the encompassing start that has all the color and all the other things going on at the same time, drawing, composition. So, yeah, that was that. So let me thank, before we go in, Adam C., Norma T. for that ridiculously wonderful amount that you've done several times, Norma. Thank you so much for that kind support. So needed all the time. Anyway, and Alexander W. Thank you, Alexander. Guys, thank you for all your subscribing, sharing, commenting, and all that sort of stuff. This one today is going to be off the cuff. This is something I've been seeing in an intensive I was working on with some people here. And I'm just seeing that there's a need for us to recur to one thing, and that is what is the nature of a start? What does a start look like? Every time I say to a student, what does a start look like? They'll say, first you do this, and then you do that, and then you do that. And I say, no, let's come back. A start is a thing. At the end of a period of time, you will have said, now that's a good start. What does that look like? Now, Paxton models it. Tarbell, Benson, all these guys, they all model this start thing, right? I've showed them to you before. What does a good start look like? Well, we're talking about a Boston School start, which in a summary of it is what we're talking about is a start that has all the essence of all the elements that there are in the visual impression, in the visual world. Color schemes, color movements, form, light effects, and values, edges and edge relationships. It has composition, et cetera, right? What can you think of? That is the very nature of, and I put us in this category of what we're going to talk about today, and that is all the horses. All the horses. I did a video somewhere way back in the 200s, I think, called All Over the Place at Once in the Start, All Over the Place at Once in the Start. Well, this is the all the horses discussion today. What are the horses? And all the horses at once, you have to get them all under control in the start. And the key to it, of course, is write each one of them big. You can talk about form, but you can't talk about little form. You can talk about color schemes, but you can't talk about the minuteness of what color movements are happening in tiny little places that are inconsequential to the big plan of the color scheme. Do you see what I mean? So everything a bit big. The form, the big forms, the egg of the head, the grand tube, shall we say, of a leg or something like that. Do you see what I mean? That's all the stuff that's in that first several hours of the start when you're trying to close the canvas out and be able to say, yes, this is going to be worth finishing or worth taking wherever I choose to take it. But it has all the essential ingredients that makes up the that makes up the essence of the beauty I see in front of us. That wasn't very well said, but so there we are. So I made a list here of all these things that we're trying to, that we expect to see in a good start. But I just want to look at these starts with you and see if you can agree with me. We're talking about a color scheme. That means all the color data, so you can see what the plan is, and it looks like you can actually make a judgment. When it's a 2D world, you can make the judgment better. just looking at nature through a viewfinder, not really the thing. When you get it on your canvas, now you can look at it like a painting, and you can decide if it's actually a good color scheme. Better. So, but that's big stuff, though. It's not little stuff. It's majors, right? So colors, relations, color movements, the most chromatic note being right to all the other ones, the color order, and the dark is dark and the light is light, that all relates to that and gets us into values. And the whole world of values, and you darken your eyes to see what value units are going to stay together and which are going to be separated, which must be separated because they're so key. Like in a dark picture, the light spots, you can't go run away from them. That's the game. That's the large game of the values. It's the general value of the picture, general tonality of the picture, plus the spotting, the distribution of the spots, and any games they play in that run on the big, right? So the size changes or the movement changes through the picture, all that stuff. Not the littleness within them. Okay, and that's a big deal to say we're not working within them. We're not working from the minors out. We're working from the distribution. The field, we're working from the composition, really. And I say that not meaning the two-dimensional thing that we're talking about, but everything in the page at once is the composition when you're doing an impressionist. And that makes us different from other people. Just keep that in mind, that we're always in this sort of viewfinder, this rectangle mind. But there'll be shapes in this kind of a mind, but it's going to be the shapes. Degas would say it's all silhouettes. It's going to be the silhouettes of the major readers. It's going to be just the ones that we need, and they're going to be isolated with local, local readers, the local reading. And any shapes you make, any points you make are going to have point angle things that produce a point angle relationship that has to be corrected, of course, and any geometries that are made out of the points that you're ultimately winding up with. Those things have to be true in a good start, right? So many things have to be right. Everything has to be on there. Every kind of horse will be on a start, typically, right? Every kind will be there. So constellations of points is going to be on there. Points will be on there. The order of the impression of the lights, the projectiveness of lights, that's going to be on there. All the light effects are going to be there. They're either going to be right or wrong in their relation. So if you put in many, and you won't be able to get the time in to finish your start in a matter of hours, which is very much what the goal is. You want to do it. By the way, for a student, I don't expect you to do a good start in 3 hours, but you certainly should be able to get to the point where you say the start is over, even if it took you 9 hours, because look at it. Look at it. It's got all the essence and nothing minor. Okay? So it will have a lost and found look to it. And I'm just going to show pictures in 2 seconds, but have these in mind as we're drifting through this. I talked about the spotting and all that stuff. The general tonality of the picture, if it's a dark picture, it should look like a dark picture when you get it covered by the end of the day. It shouldn't look like a middle tone picture. Yeah. And the color of the painting, if it's a warm painting, it shouldn't look like a blue painting. Right? But you have to learn to see those bigger ideas and make sure yours conforms. That's all characteristic, though, of what a start looks like. It has a definite color that resembles the grand color, should we say, or the general color. And the relative chromaticity. Does this feel like a highly chromatic picture, or is it a fairly neutral picture? Those sorts of things will show in the start. They must. That's it. That's in the nature of the start. But it's not going to be a thousand little things. It's going to be done with the major masses and what happens where they meet. It's going to have an element of the textural. If you're doing a landscape, you might have a building that's going to be relatively smooth, and the grass is going to be relatively textury. We're calling it that for lack of a better word, but there's a certain busyness quotient, right? And if you're doing an impressionist thing, the busyness areas should have that. They won't be made out of bits of grass and 1,000 little marks. It'll be a large expression of them that generalizes about it for a bit. Even though the colors are dead on the money or really beautiful in the sense of making the big color scheme, that area of surface will be broken for a little bit. So as to imply a texture just for the sake of the general impression. There is a general impression that has what we call generalities, but they're all about conveying the big composition. So if an area is smooth, it shouldn't look busy. If it's busy, it shouldn't look smooth, that sort of thing, right? Doesn't mean we're slicking it up to make it look slick smooth. It just means there's a relative degree of it, and your picture should contain it. I'll show you how all that stuff works. I hope I can get showing the pictures that'll come across to you. We have, so the center of interest will be well placed in a good composition. It'll be just exactly where you want it. The exits will be where you want it, and the general distribution of whatever does read will feel like it's summing up that space, that room, that the stuff of that portrait or the landscape. Ultimately, everything is about the big impression, right? You're just watching no matter what you do. We're doing this big because we have to get through it in a matter of hours. We're learning to darken our eyes to see exactly what not to draw, what things can tend to hang together. And then once we find the ones that not to draw, we find that leaves us with the ones that we must articulate well. And there's an element then of the finish in those points. You have to articulate them well enough so that the edge play, because the edge play and the relationships of edges is true from the beginning. It's not going to be handling every single edge because we aren't putting out every single edge. We're putting out a minimum number. Again, what's conveyed to us by saying, what are we going to really draw here is what is strong to the eye, what gives us this projective quality, and we're going to try to do a bit of what we call the lost and found, which is not a trick. It's a method. It's part of the method. It goes with the territory. We're finding out in this grand ensemble what are the players and where they land. So we have to be articulate in places, but there are such a thing as players and things whose time hasn't come yet. Starts don't contain the things whose time hasn't come yet, except sometimes for the purpose of setting up an exit or something like that. Okay? If we could paint it as a purist, and only do visual order and the stuff and the strength of the visual order, but you can't because you do have to set up the page. So there's going to be frequently things that read at minor levels that we need, like exits. They're frequently not part of the power structure. And yet, this whole thing about where the center of interest locates and the way the rest of the data lands in the page, I'm thinking of an interior, is crucial to the composition, and you need to know where it is. Certain parameters about where your picture is going to end and start have to be in the picture, and sometimes they're not strong players. But they still need to be right in relation to the strong players. So the order is always going to be there. The visual order, the order of the effects, the strength of the effects in relation to the other effects, it needs to be true to as you go, right? So the picture is always, again, in harmony and unity as you go. It will look unified. It'll look like the unity of that general impression if you do this relationally well. The values to values, the edges to edges, the effects to effects, locations of things to each other, and do all that kind of work well. So, all right. So that's and the last point is there's going to be you want a workable surface. I say a surface as even as you can get it, and especially at joints where dark meets a light, you want that surface to not have ridges and stuff like that on it. So at the end of a start, you should have a surface that's pleasing to look at. And your marks on it, by the way, even your marks should be part of that thing about the aesthetic. So don't make them pretty. I say necessarily, but the point isn't pretty as much as not obnoxious in certain ways. Sometimes you gash 3 or 4 strokes all in a row in an area where there really doesn't have strokes, may have texture, and it just takes over the painting. It can look pretty bad. So the general impression of the painting can be damaged by things like that. But mostly when I'm talking about ridges. Don't be real thick hit this place and real thin in some other places. Try to keep a unity of surface. And the lay-in of an impressionist painting, you don't have to have thick in the lights and thin in the darks. There'll be a tendency to be thin in the darks because you don't want ridges. But there's no reason to build up lights much yet. Sometimes that happens as you go along. So let's leave it at that. Just look at some pictures, right? We did look at this picture a bit. Now you can see it's a beautiful color scheme. The center of the picture is the most chromatic, enjoyable stuff here. You can see that there's more drawing in like this zone, and the busyness of all this stuff here together makes up the center of interest, and it has been worked on more than other places. This isn't a perfect example of what I'm talking about, but it's a very good example of big and beautiful without getting into subplot. It's a stunning example of it. You probably will never find any better an example. Even though for students' purposes, I like looking at these better because you can more easily see where we're doing the work and where we're not doing the work, right? So you can see that the goal here, the end of the start here, there's no minor activity. Yes, the texture is implied, the busyness of the dress all implied. The atmospheric unity of the shadow is implied. It's set up pretty flat. As I said before, the composition is set up, so these exits are really intentionally placed, right? He's made sure that that's working well. He's placed his center really exactly where he wanted. You can see his composition is it's a nice composition, nicely set up. This one is sort of more doubtful to me. It doesn't show up as a great composition yet. It looks like all the interest is going out the window sort of over here. It probably, in person it may, or who knows what he does when he works it up, how much this balances, and he's actually framing this little story there. I think there's supposed to be a cat here in the final version of this thing. And you might look at the final version. I think it's out there somewhere. But you're going to see this. The tendency is for there to be a certain amount of form and a power structure in the lights. So whatever this is doing, in this case here, you can see there's a lot of work right here. This is the sharpest edge probably in the painting. And that would be an edge that then would be useful for relating to all the other edges, and it would be an effect that would be useful. Not necessarily your strongest light effect. It's certainly not your most contrasty spot. But that's a place where you can actually see there's a certain amount of areas where you go and make something that they're doing it as if it were the last time. So there's a bit of the element of the finish in the start, as I've said before. But other areas, you may be only suggesting certain aspects of it, getting it to be adequately that. And again, the idea is, can we get this thing covered? Get down the essentials, so we would tell this is going to be a good composition. We do that in one sitting. And so what does a start like that look like? Well, you can see there's not a whole lot of inside information in these little areas. We don't need to figure anything out in there. You got to learn to trust your major things and how they play to each other, and learn to be good at them. But get these things placed well, so how they play to each other and all that stuff, so that you can see that it's the implied. Again, if you darken your eye, that's what you're seeing. Those things have to be ordered well in relation to each other, but you can see whether that's working or not. So you can see the majors of your composition are already here, even though nothing is worked up a little. Some of you guys will be working on this drawing over here and doing stuff to it way before it's time. We're trying to do something specific in all these shades, blinds, or stuff inside here. I don't know if some parts of this are second day. I think it feels very much, I haven't seen this in person, it feels much like a first day picture, or one lay-in picture, or one skin picture. Let's look at all these other ones. So here's a good example of the form is well said. It's not anything particular, but it's not flat, right? So there's forminess that's implied. So there's an element of form. All your pictures want to have that list. Where's the form? Is there form in this picture? The sky is a flatness. You could call that a form. This is a roundness, right? This is like a ball. This is what I mean by form, that there's an element of form in all paintings. And so to have that sense of form is crucial to saying the general impression. Now, this area of field is mostly just sort of flat, right? And this stuff is just noisy, but it has a little cutout, but it doesn't have form per se. So it's pretty limited to what's happening through this zone here. Again, what kind of picture is this? You can tell this is a sunny day a mile away, can't you? Or the same thing in this picture here. And you can see the color of these pictures, the general tonality. This is a light picture. This is a middle tone to dark picture. Certainly a middle tone picture. So keep all those things in mind. Yeah, but one of the thing that's sort of crucial about all this stuff is that you have the idea pictured in your mind of what it looks like when the essence of it's done, and you can get out of there. It's a very gratifying moment if you can learn to talk about the essentials in a picture and articulate them really well, so that you can see what's coming. You can see the train coming way down the tracks. That whole lost and found model. There's probably some really wonderful subtleness eventually happening in here. But the setup is about this and this and this and the location of this blob in this rectangle. And then secondarily, some of the play of the data here and the data out there. You can see what it's going to do to be able to see your composition. If you do these notes with good color, so that your color scheme is also there for you, you can tell what you have in the color scheme. And you can tell and if you have the things ordered by visual effects, so whatever is strong is, the high contrast with the sharp edges and the order of the projection and all that. So, the light's going to be doing crazy stuff. The space is going to be going. And it's one of the things you could talk about. The space should power up. It should look unified in a 3D way. Things shouldn't look flat. If it looks flat, it's not a good start. So these things, like something like this, really comes jerking toward us, doesn't it? I mean, by the way, the visual order, sometimes these guys can come flying toward us more than other things. This might actually present as flat in the picture, but there's always an order to, the strength of effects. By way of the 3D, there's a suggested depth order. Leonardo talks about it. We talk about it too. So this one is a good example of it, actually, the effects, the projectiveness of this arm over what's happening to the head here. He's not making that stuff up, but he's making sure he talks about quality of silhouette here, the contrast plus edge and the shaping, and he's comparing it like how weak that is back there and whatever the strength of these other ones. And they're ordered to each other. Even in a drawing like this, these are visually ordered joints. And these are the ones he sort of blurred down, and he says these are the essential things. I'm going to draw a few of these things here and suggest a bunch of the other stuff in between. Even though he does go around and throw some lines like this, like anybody might, throw a few lines around. You can see what he's done in the next iteration is he's actually setting up the visual order so he can see what the painting is going to be doing in that way. It's not just a drawing thing, although he's trying to find the composition here, and he did change it a bit. But this is a search for the composition. I think this is even gridded up, so he seems to have actually wanted not to lose it. I like the challenge of actually doing it from scratch, not gridding it up, even if I do a drawing like this. So good start, right? Good start. Beautiful color scheme. Colors look good to each other. The light effect looks true. The edge relationships look true, but they're not every little one. It's just the big ones, And this wonderful amount of lost and found color movements will happen in a big picture. You'll see color movements. Not a lot of little colors with little names attached to them or shape names and stuff, no matter what Monet says about that. But you'll see articulate joint here, but then you'll see the great sweeping movement. Or even this one that sort of has a sweeping joint, chromatic, very, very beautiful chromatic, just grazing, gradually moving into darker. And these kinds of movements, if you darken your eyes, this is the embodiment of the lost and found model. And this picture looks so clear, and yet look how how much there ain't, shall we say? And that a good start. This doesn't even have to be this good and a good start. He probably can already see, even if he didn't do anything down here, probably could always already see what he's going to have in his grand composition. These kinds of areas are going to be commonplace. Looking for the drawing right there. That's not going to change this picture. This line right here, playing off of some other data down here, playing off of some other data here, that's the setup, and that stuff is going to be really right, true to each other. The colors are going to be true to each other. So the relational truth of a start is impressive. It just isn't big. It isn't 1,000 little things. It's a handful of big things, and the way they relate in all the categories. The angle, and the angle relationships are all going to be good in a start. The points and the constellation that points make in relation to each other. This here to this here, and maybe tip of nose to whatever. These are all well seen. A good start has all these things in them. Those things are well expressed. But if you do too many of them, if you do the second level of readability, you're going to be lost. You won't be able to get to the end of the start. So one of the things that focuses on the majors and the broader movements of color and stuff like in value and stuff like that is the need to get it done, but to be good at the same time. So there's an element of finish. In this lay-in here, this is incredibly articulate, considering what it ain't out here. It's really magnificently articulate in the visual sense. That's as beautiful as drawing gets in painting, that edge along in there. But it's still the start. It's still saying, so when you guys are saving your neural energy for the major, for strong guys, put the time in there. When you see what those are going to be, put the time in and get the whole world set up by these guys. Just put the time in until they sing, until the whole picture is practically set up by just a handful of major players. This one in the middle is one by Mary Menifee, and it's a nice example of being all over the place at once, of course, but also establishing all the kinds of players. She has some good form play in different places. She has, when it happens, she's there. The wall being flat, whatever the forminess is of other things, that's all good. But you can see the distribution of the colors looks like it's well reasoned, but nothing minor is happening in here. People sometimes think it's minor to draw this well. It's not minor, that's major. This is a major effect. It's an important effect. This is an important effect. This is an important effect. This in here, render it harmless. If this starts looking like it's ugly fat or something like that, well, move the colors over a little bit, but don't be in there trying to draw in there. Don't be doing it. Save your drawing for spots like this, or this over here where you need it, where it's going to have big consequences related to the composition. And again, make sure you're aware of your exits. That's when you would set in there early, much as I've done in this painting over here, set these exits up. because this whole figure is set up with like a platform, as it were, mentality, right? So these exits are a big deal. The location of anything that looks like an exit is a very big deal. I say not anything, but the composition that's a very significant part of the composition. But the most important thing is placing the major power of value here with its leading effect. That's the most important thing in this composition. So compositionally speaking, you have two things to do in my view, and that is to establish this major mass, which will include, by the way, that's your major form there. So some great sweeping tube is all you kind of need. And a big color movement, not every dinky little color, but a big color movement. And right where this joint is, having the color meeting the hair color, dead on the money. Any place you go to use something for measuring, make sure you do that last. A good start has that last bit of truth. You're trying to call it accuracy, but truth of the look of nature. You know, once it comes and starts being a real thing, the color meets the color, the value meets the value, the edge has to be right, and the shape has to come on. That just goes with the territory, okay? So you'll see whenever something's being used or the picture's being closed out, all the majors are talking, and they're all talking well to each other, and their color relations are all well expressed to each other. Color scheme, you can see in both these, we can plainly see the color scheme. This isn't as complicated as one could, just a purple shirt and a gray background, but it's still evident what the color scheme is. This is a great case of the sort of the tube of the neck, the flatness of the chest area, and the egg of the skull being there, dominating shapes. And then in a lay-in like this, in a demo like this, you have time. You have to articulate these key readers, these things like this, because of their major effects. So you have to do good drawing. You have to be a good placement of look choice and the look of nature at the place where you have created a top, and or a bottom, even this little V right here, right, and the exit, and all those things. And you probably, there's going to be a color movement in this egg. It's one of the values of making the egg is it gives you a chance to sort of manipulate the color movement like it was clay. And then before the day is over, you will have time to get over and do some of the second levels of the plot, which is this, this. And this is not second level, but which we just tend to put it off. Well, so we search out the color scheme and get the highlight of the general light glow of the globe in the right place, of the egg. And then very quickly, this comes in pretty early, this thing here, more than anything else. It comes in because it has a conversation with these guys, all the big noisy guys out in the rest of the page. But I'm just saying, if you look at the start, we don't have to necessarily have a mouth, because in the visual order of things, the mouth might not even show. But you can't escape from that. And ultimately, you can't escape from the noise here. So a start has the key noisy areas being somewhat like they are. And you'll see that in all these starts. This is an advanced start. It's one of multiple days, multiple hours. So it isn't quite in the same level of start, but it's still not trying to do anything except be useful. You know, when you do something like this, you're trying to just get better play between. If you just stay in the impressionist model, which is this to this and that to that, you're going to have a good start. But the thing our good starts look like is they look like we're dealing with majors and not minors. Even though we have, shall we say, a little thing like a belly button, we're not getting in there noodling stuff, okay? You see, I talked about that a week or so ago. Or over here, we're really trying to get this and getting into the big conversation with whatever else it talks to, this power place here. Eventually, if it just looks silly as you're going along, you'll add more to it. I mean, if it just looks silly in the general unity of things. So that becomes a busier area. You got to deal with that. This is one of those places where I'm telling you not to have strokes that are so obnoxious. That sort of does damage to this. So it's not a freestanding fun painting if you have gash lines across places like that. So yeah, you don't mind having looseness in places. In fact, I prefer to have looseness. That's the look of the start. But I like that looseness, but it's not chaotic looseness. It's not just random looseness. And that does head that way a little bit. That's me. Sometimes I do that because it keeps me in the bold mood, you know, and I don't like to get locked into littleness. So yeah, if you use little brushes, you'll tend to do little things too. So that's one argument for, even though we're doing color movements, and color movements can be done with big brushes. Single edges at a time can be done with big brushes. So you'd be surprised. And I say big, I don't mean big, but but certainly a 8 or 10, 12, maybe as high as 10 or 12 could be used in a lot of this painting, which is about 20 inches high, maybe. Maybe it's higher than that. Anyway, but the look, right? So you see light effects, you see color movements, you see the color scheme, you see you see the distribution, you see the leading chromas and the order of chromal value, you see the order of the visual of the light of the effects, and the visual order. You see things coming forward and going back. If you darken your eye down, or if you pop your eyes and just let things come to you, you'll see there's an establishment going on of space. These are the things you will see in a good start. So if you can picture these, let these be little models to you of what your start. As I said before, maybe the most valuable thing is that question of what it doesn't have. It doesn't. You're not interested in subplot, even though sometimes you show some secondary things. You're not interested in it. You won't lose time there. Remember the neural energy problem. You will spend your good neural energy on majors. This whole start at the beginning of a painting, I find it's in an impressionist painting. That's the moment of the greatest energy you'll ever have in the painting. Is right there on the whole. So really take advantage of it to do big and important things, right? Great color scheme things, establishing the light, in major ways, but everything. But don't be into subplot. Don't be into visual minors. Don't be into actual objects, because that really sucks you into all those things. And I was going to recommend that you just make a list like this for yourself of what the starts you're looking at here don't have. I'm showing you Boston School starts. What don't they have? That's a really big deal. What don't they have? And by the way, you can pick any of these, and you say, well, I think that's more characteristic of a really early start. But what don't they have? You see, a lot of this could be called a generalization. What does he have, though? What he doesn't have is a lot of little drawing. He has some places that are probably going to be significant. He's going to use them for the run, the silhouette, the play of this line. But he's not doing every little thing. Maybe something like this is just characteristic. That bow or whatever it is just sits there like this all the time. There's always a gash like that. That movement of drapery. And he's going to find something here. But mostly he's just getting this into the zone of being what it generally does plus, right? And so you just have to know that where the thing that really happens, you've got to do something there. You've got to say something in these places. So we're not generalizing in a lost kind of way. Like Impressionism has that bad reputation of just being vague. Good painters aren't vague. The good painters are doing real drawing in key places all the time. Good impressionists are. This kind of stuff here. If you're like Monet, you're just dedicated to the color thing and exploring that to the nth degree. You can do that without drawing like this, and you should probably. But if you're talking about what the Boston School model looks like, we're talking about what we do here. This is definitely one that has the power structure of the high contrast joints, the light effect popping off the page, and the order of those effects, subsequent effects, being all rightly related to each other. Key thing is always, what's the big storyline? Well, you have color, which has chroma and values. You have spotting on the page, the darks and lights distribution across the page. All those things that you have form, you have texture versus smooth, but all the general impressions data, if you can just make a little list of it to yourself, none of it you'll notice has anything to do with anatomy, which is the mercy of this way of working. But there's no mercy in the way of working if you don't realize how much you have to do, given that it's just a color. You have to adjust the color every which way. You have to adjust it to all the other colors, and you have to adjust it in terms of its chroma and its values, as well as its hue. You have to keep on this model of adjusting and adjusting. So there's a lot of work to be done. It just doesn't require that. Fortunately, it doesn't require that other stuff that has to do with anatomy. It's just value units and what happens where they meet, like what you're seeing over here at the edge of this pond. That's what we do. Other things, these can be suggested for a while, but someplace along here we're saying, and specifically my leading light is like right here. That's going to happen continuously no matter where you go in our way of working. So, but I'm just saying that's what's going to be there. But if you can just look at these and see what isn't there, now you're not counting leaves in that version of it. You're not counting leaves, but you're seeing great textures. You're seeing big forms. Even the plane of this thing with its roughness is showing, right? You're seeing the smoothness out here versus the busyness. So all these categories of stuff that we've made in this list, just have a look at it. That should be your game, right? You just take a look at that list, look at these pictures, and see if you can. And what I would recommend is literally what I did is I literally started doing a bunch of relatively small little still lifes or whatever. It doesn't matter what it is you choose to do, but it's do a series of them and see if you can see if you can stay disciplined enough to do just majors and to do them really well. So we're talking about, you're doing majors. Well, this is a major phenomenon in this thing once you realize what we mean by that. And how well can you do that? Making its shape, its contrast, its sharpness of edge, and its location on the page, and all that sort of stuff. This takes doing the majors, and what happens at the joints of these major things to produce the light and all that sort of stuff. This requires real good focus, real acuity. So I'm really hoping you can accept these as being extremely, in a sense, brilliant operations. But the biggest discipline is, how do you stay in the majors? How do you stay in the majors? And can you get to the end of it and see that you didn't go to any minor place? And yes, in the majors, we've produced the magic of the big impression. And leave yourself open to take it any place you feel like after that. So, but that's it. The question is, what's the look? What's the look of the start? Not how do you do it, 1, 2, 3. I did give you some of that. But what's the look of a good start? What does it contain? And I've made the list for you. It's, that little short list. Values, line, and color is where it all begins. So if you can find out the subplots of those things, the kinds of things, like if you're talking about values, you're talking about form sometimes. Or if you're talking about values, you're talking about light effects at times. So what's the list look like? That would be all the horses list. What are the names of all the horses? So I've run that by you before. I've even probably described them to you before, but you just accept that we're just impressionists. All we can do is what's visual in our eyes, which means it's just values and colors, or you might say color values, and how big they are and what happens where they meet, you know what I'm saying? And a certain amount of what kind of color movements they have in them, or et cetera, but, those are big, big, big thoughts. And so a lot of times people think we're worried about every little spot because of the way the impressionists talk. In a sense you are, because this whole thing isn't going to work if those areas of the thing are the wrong color. But we limit it in the lay-in, even there, to getting this larger color right and getting the effect to play right of the color relation between these two, and the light effect to be popping, as well as making the shape and making it in the right place. So if you know that's what we're doing, if you can stay with those majors, so what would a start look like to you? Do you have a good picture of the start, and have you done one yet? And that's the challenge, really. Have you done one yet? I think I may have left a lot out of this one. I've done it in a way that's a little more dry than what I did originally a minute ago. But I think I took 10 less minutes, so I hope I didn't just leave stuff out for you guys. As I said, what I want you to do is you get to the end of this thing, make that list of what you don't see in many of these starts. What's missing? I'm talking about what's missing from what nature would look like. If you're sitting there looking at nature, what would you see beyond this? Have we done more than we should? With the idea that we need to get out after one day of painting. As I said, 2 hours, I aim at 2 hours. If it takes 3, if it takes 4, it doesn't kill me. And in a big one, it might. But if you can have that as your modus operandi, it will help you to focus on the majors, to major in the majors, okay? So think big plot. When you look at these starts, think what's big and think what's left out. And you'll start having more clarity about what's in. Everything that happens in painting is in starts. Everything. It's just writ big. All right. I think that's the story. So again, let me thank our good friends with the dollars for this week, Adam C., Norma T., and Alexander W. Guys, much appreciated. We went and reviewed a location yesterday with the idea of maybe doing an interior and landscape composition. Intensive workshop. We're thinking hard about it. We might make a decision soon. If anybody wants to give me feedback about whether that'd be interesting, it would be in the States this time. This particular one would be in the States. We're still trying to arrange something over in Europe for to maybe have 2 things next year. But we're thinking of the fall, which is, the fall in New England is as beautiful as any place you'll ever go on the earth, probably. I've often said there's nothing more beautiful than the fall in New England in the fall. So here we are in northern New Hampshire on the Canadian border. And might be an opportunity, if you guys let me know, but it might be an opportunity for all you guys who talk about, they're in the States and talk about making a visit. It would be a September into October and all that. We're even thinking of creating a venue, finding a venue where we can have people live in and we can live and work in the same space, like a lodge. So still be limited though, probably limited to a dozen people. But anyway, that's our thought right now. The second thing is we had 19,000 plus. We just went over 19,000 subscribers. So thank you all for being there. Very exciting. Mr. Producer and I are talking about doing a Christmas show again, opening up to you guys. Still want to do something probably special for you guys who've been such faithful contributors over all this time. And I'd love to maybe do a Zoom call where you guys can be there live, all of you, or yeah, or something. All right, well, that's enough extra talk. You probably already shut up. All right, so have a good painting week. I'll see you in the next iteration of this thing. All right, take care.